Welcome to the Wide Lens podcast, where expanding your perspective on recent history is our mission. Listen to untold accounts from overlooked voices and see familiar stories in a whole new light. Ready to dive deeper? Let's begin.
Hey folks, on this episode, we're interviewing Rob Belanger. I apologize, it's not a perfect pronunciation, but it's pretty good. Rob lives in Sudbury, Ontario. It's about 4 hours outside of Toronto in Canada, and he works in health and safety, get this, at an explosives company. Pretty important role at a place like that. But what we're talking about today is that in the summer of 1999, he was a college student at the University of Ottawa and was able to work one of the most famous, or some might say infamous, music festivals of our time. That's Woodstock 99, 30 years after the original, and that happened in Rome, New York. This podcast, this session is going to be around the chaos that started, that happened there, and also the world famous music acts that Rob was able to see really from a backstage and from a personal perspective. So right now we're going to hear all about it. And so welcome, Rob. It's really good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Hey, Rob, well, incredible. I mean, this was a music event that folks didn't know what they were getting into. I mean, folks did know that there was just a phenomenal lineup and there were so many world famous acts that were going to be there. And I mean, it had, of course, the name Woodstock attached to it, which is historical within itself. But first question that we've got for you is, Rob, what led you to be involved in Woodstock 99? How did you get involved there? How did you get there?
Right. So I was going to school in Ottawa. And, well, I'd like to tell people that I was doing my homework or something on the computer, but probably wasn't. I remember it was the summer, I thought maybe spring. I was sitting in front of the computer and I may have seen a banner ad or something along those lines of, Woodstock 99. I was surprised. I grew up in Woodstock 94 was my generation, I guess. And they released, all the videos on all the music television, and I think they released a CD compilation of it. So, of course, I was pretty pumped about that. So, hearing 99, I thought, wow, they're having another one. And so, I immediately clicked on the link because my curiosity wanted to know who was playing, who was on the lineup. I mean, the 94 lineup looked pretty, was pretty great. So, I wanted to see. And so, when I got there when I landed on the page, and I just saw all these names, and it was incredible. I thought, Rage Against the Machine, wow, Metallica, Korn, all these new bands. And at the time, I was a little bit into Dave Matthews Band. I mean, I was probably eclectic in my music taste, and so I was, into that electronica too, and saw Chemical Brothers, and it really kind of put me over the edge a bit. I was like, wow, these guys are big, and I really liked them, and at the time, and I guess I still do. And then there was this Canadian band that, every Canadian at the time, probably still, were gaga about. And we followed this Canadian band called the Tragically Hip. They were on the lineup, and I was just shocked. And I thought, wow, how do I get there? Or how do I get involved? Or how do I get a ticket? But, first and foremost, where is it?
So this was a band that was pretty huge in Canada at the time?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, not at the time. I would say probably for over 2.5 decades. It's probably Canada's band. They've made major documentaries about this band and the following from the early 80s till, sadly, the lead singer died of a brain tumor, and his last shows were being held on CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting, shown across Canada. And I mean, I really can't find another equivalent. I've heard some people compare them to REM, the way that they had a following, but it was just, they really struck Canada, and there was a pretty big following in my group of friends, but even, older and younger, we just loved this band. And
how many times would you say, Rob, if you had to guess, how many times have you seen them live?
Friends and I drove to Cleveland to see them. Oh, probably 5-6 times. Yeah. waited
Nice.
overnight to get tickets and stuff.
For sure.
They're huge. They're huge in Canada. And like I said, probably the equivalent to something like REM. So they're big. You know, when I saw their name on the lineup with everybody else, I thought, hey, yeah, I mean, where is this place? Woodstock. I thought it was just sort of the name, sort of like Lollapalooza or whatever. I didn't really realize at the time that it was Woodstock, New York was, you know, the original location. And so I was like, okay, well, for me as a Canadian, I'm like, well, New York, that's far. You know, it's pretty far from me. But before Google Maps, there was some sort of online atlas. I remember using it. I mean, you'll have to look that one up, but in 99, whatever I used, but I found that the location, Rome, New York.
You probably use something like maybe like MapQuest or something. Is that it? Maybe.
Maybe it was MapQuest, something Atlas. I don't know. Yeah, maybe something
Sure.
like that. Back in the 90s, whatever we used. So anyway, I didn't find it was all that far. I think it was like 3.5 hours away. I thought, well, that's shorter than me driving to my home of Sudbury from Ottawa. So, okay, well, that seems to be like somewhere I'd like to go, but I don't have a car. How do I get there? So who can I like convince out of my buddies who has got a car? How do I convince them to go? And what's the cost of tickets? And all those questions sort of were running through my head. But then I saw in the corner of the page was volunteer. I said, well, I got nothing to lose. So I clicked on volunteer. And shortly after, I would say probably within a week, I got an email saying, we'd like to have you down in Rome, New York for a training session as an information guide.
I mean, technically, Rob, you were like an international visitor to the US to do this. There wasn't any issues around like visas or whatnot to get you.
There certainly was.
What happened?
Okay, so I ended up getting that, and I thought, well, how do I get there? And so I convinced a buddy of mine who had a car. I said, just come with me, just show up, and they'll let you in. They're not going to turn you around.
Right.
So we jumped in his car. We drove from Ottawa through Kingston. There's a bridge in Kingston, ironically, for the town where the Tragedy Goods from. So then we get into northern New York, like we're that, I don't know, where Kingston passes into the States. That's up.
Maybe in like Buffalo, around that area?
No, that's kind of closer to Toronto. I would say by Utica.
Okay,
sort of that area.
Gotcha.
But anyway, so then we start driving. Like I said, it wasn't really that far. So we went to this. They offered 2 information training sessions the week before Woodstock and maybe 2 weeks before. I believe we went to the one 2 weeks prior. And it was pretty crazy just going down. So that whole idea of training, we went down and there was no festival going on at the time. This was 2 weeks prior. And so we're in these small northern towns in New York and, we're Canadian, we're outsiders and show up. And there was this sort of a half-day training. And they said, all right, well, here's your badges. Here's your shirt. You're going to come and work at Woodstock. So the weekend of the concert, we pile back in his car and we head down with all our gear. And, we're excited. We go across the border and the border patrol officer says, where are you guys going? We're going to Woodstock, so excited. We're working there. And as soon as he heard us say we're working, well, do you have a working visa?
Bad word to use, Rob.
Yeah. But I mean, we were volunteers.
Sure.
So then, but he started questioning us saying, well, what are you getting in return? You got this ticket, you're getting accommodations. So, it was a little bit of back and forth. And then he finally just let us go. He saw, gives you just 2 punk kids, go have fun sort of thing. So they let us go through, but they did give us a bit of a hassle at the border. Yeah. So,
cool.
It's okay.
So you get to Rome, you get to Woodstock 99. What did they have you do? You're volunteering and you're putting your hat on, you're doing your job. What you doing? What are they having you do?
Okay. So as an information guide, our role was to, walk around in a small group. One person in our group would have the radio, the walkie-talkie, I guess, to radio in case there was anything that we saw or anything that was happening. And basically you're just walking around enjoying the festival and looking for people that are distraught, looking for people that maybe are dehydrated or lost. And so they had booths set up for those that were lost, maybe got separated from their friends to bring them to the lost and found. And when they were there, the people in the booth were, take down your info or whatever. I guess they weren't going to keep you there all day, but they'd say, hey, meet back here at 6 so that you can reunite with your buddy or whatever. If you were dehydrated, we'd bring you to the medical tent and make sure you got some shade and electrolytes and some waters and stuff like that. So we had a group, maybe five of us, and every single person in that group was in their 20s and just wanted to rock out and enjoy the festival. So I have the walkie and I have 4 other people that are pulling us in each and every direction to go see a different band. So that was fun. So we walked around and just kind of enjoyed it. I mean,
if you had to guess, Rob, how many folks were doing your type of job at Woodstock?
Well, I remember the training session, but there would have been 2 weeks of it. There was probably, like to say, maybe 10 groups of 5, so maybe 50, but I mean, you can't quote me on that one. I don't know. Exactly.
Sure.
Later on, I always felt that it was kind of, and I'm sure you might ask me about this later, but that maybe it was a little bit short-staffed in some areas, but it, maybe it wasn't, and maybe it was along the lines that everybody just wanted to enjoy the party.
Right.
So they're, neglecting their duties sort of thing.
So speaking of that, Rob, you know what you're going to do. You've got your training. You're at Woodstock. What was your first impression once you got there? Once you're there, what was going through your mind? What was the overall take on it? First hour that folks are starting to filter in and things are starting up.
Well, like I said, we were in party mode going over the border, and the workers were allowed to get there the day before. Maybe some concert goers were allowed in on the day before, on the Thursday, but definitely all the workers were there on the Thursday. So we drove in ready to party. I mean, side story is that we were a little bit nervous about having to pay for alcohol and stuff inside. So we smuggled in some vodka in water bottles.
Okay. So, I mean, it's clear. No one was like opening them up. This is back in the day. It didn't have to be sealed, that type of thing.
Yeah. I'm pretty sneaky in my ways. So we bought 2-liter bottles of water, and, if you heat the bottom and you syringe it out and you don't break the seal on top, and you syringe the vodka back inside, and then you heat it back up with a lighter. Although, ingenuitive, I guess. So we were nervous going across the border when the patrol kind of stopped us. We thought a bunch of crazy stuff. But so here we were ready to get our party on Thursday. So they directed us to the barracks. So there were gates going one way, gates going the other way. I wasn't driving. So, hats off to my friend Eric, who was trying to navigate through the mess. But it did seem to be pretty organized, and they did go through our stuff. And I remember they told us not to bring too much gear, that much of the stuff would be provided for us. A sleeping bag, I think, was all we were allowed to bring or whatever. So by the time we got to the barracks, it was just a collection of homes, of little townhomes on a street, it almost seemed like. And so everyone had their own. There'd be a pile of people in one home next to the other, and so.
So, Rob, did they build these for Woodstock, or were they already there?
No, they were already there because it was an Air Force base.
Okay.
And I imagine these were the barracks for, the military or the U.S. Air Force. So, but they were completely empty. Not one single piece of furniture. So we walked in and there wasn't even hot water put on. So we were given blow-up mattresses, single blow-up mattresses, and 3 to a room sort of thing. But every house was partying and didn't seem to stop anybody or deter or sour anyone. So we got there and we commenced partying with our new friends and then the new coworkers we had. And believe George Clinton and the P-Funk All-Stars, or George Clinton put on a performance for the workers that night, which was awesome.
Did he perform in the regular lineup as well too, Rob, or was that
I
just
think
for
he
you
did.
guys?
Yeah,
He did.
he did. But this was in one of the, they called it the rave hangars. It was like an airplane hangar. And so during the day, and this might come up a little later, but it was a place to escape the heat. There weren't many places, but this was one of the hangars which show movies. The other one, had live acts and stuff. So we were able to be there, and the mothership came down, and it was really kind of cool. So that was Thursday, and so we had a schedule of when we were supposed to meet the next day in this one tent for our breakfast, lunch, or whatever. Yeah, before you start. And so the briefing would be, okay, here's your radio. If you see anyone in trouble, then you need to radio in. You can't. So that was the start.
That's great. So, Rob, the first day, the Thursday, it's just you guys and George Clinton, and then everything commences on Friday. Is that right? And did this go like Friday to Sunday? Is that what it was?
Yeah. So the concert was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, full days. Right. And the Thursday for the workers.
So what was it like once everyone starts filing in on Friday? What was the atmosphere, and how are folks feeling? I guess it sounds a bit different. It's on an Air Force base. I'm assuming that means there's lots of asphalt, lots of tarmac everywhere. How did folks feel when they were, getting through getting through those doors on that Friday once you guys were, already there for a day?
Yeah. So, I mean, people must have been able to get there on the Thursday. Like, I know that there was a huge campground off to the other side, but that was opposite to where we were staying. So if you saw the map, you basically had a big L-shaped tarmac, and all the workers and the vendors and their tents would be sort of in the center of the big L.
Was it like a non-working Air Force base, like one that was like decommissioned? And
yeah, I think Griffiths Air Force Base. Yeah.
Okay.
In Roma. Maybe look it up to when it was, but I think I read that somewhere when it was decommissioned. So anyway, people must have been able to get there on the Thursday to start setting up their tents, but maybe the gates to the actual venue, was not yet open until Friday. But yeah, I mean, I wandered through there on Friday, and we saw people setting up tents and stuff, and it did seem to be a little bit disorganized. People, were worried they wouldn't be able to find their tents when they came back, staggering at the late hours.
So folks were basically like allowed a specific area where they could throw up their tents.
Yeah.
And then there was an area where was there just like a main stage? Were there multiple stages?
So no, there were two main stages, east and west. And I believe they were, approximately like a mile apart. So you had to walk.
You're kidding me.
Oh yeah, it was far. So you had to sort of plan out where you wanted to go and how. I mean, I guess don't quote me on a mile, but like
it was far.
It was really far. So they would have to walk down the one side of the L, then turn the corner and go down. And in the center, where the hangars were, and all along there'd be vendors and so forth.
So you've got like you've got bands playing on both stages at the same time, but because they're far
apart.
They're far apart, so the music's not blending into each other, right? Did they also try to keep the genres or like kind of like the styles different? Because I mean, it'd be really frustrating if you showed up and there's two bands that you really want to see and they're playing at the same time, or maybe right back to back at two different locations. Do they try to kind of keep the feel similar in the areas, or did people really have to be running back and forth?
That's a good question. I didn't find that there was any real plan in terms of keeping one sort of genre in one area or so forth. But I mean, in 1999, there was an eclectic sound of music. Anything from Rusty Root to Chemical Brothers or Metallica, and it was there. So I think it was just, and I know I read online that may have caused some of the problems later on, that there was too much aggression, I guess, one right after the other on one particular day. But so no, I don't think there was any like real thought in doing so. I mean, you wouldn't see like Sheryl Crow on one, side, and the metalheads would be at the other. I don't think there was anything like that.
Right. Gotcha. So you're there, you're there, Rob. The bands are starting to play. I'm guessing that you're like, okay, I'm volunteering here. I need to make sure that folks are safe and hydrated, and I'm responding to people who've got any issues and whatnot. But at the same time, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I want to see some of these acts. I want to be a part of this. This is a great, inexpensive way or free way for me to be a part of this. What would you say, Rob, for you is like what really stood out to you when you got there of like, wow, this is different. I wasn't expecting anything like this, because this is a bit of an alternative event for a lot of folks. So yeah, what jumped out to you?
So, I mean, on Friday, everyone was in good mood. Everyone in sun was shining. Everyone's getting ready to see, a day of music.
It was hot, but not too hot, or was it pretty hot?
It was hot and very hot.
Very
it
hot.
Started hot. Yeah, and
what month was this in again?
July.
July. Okay.
And on a tarmac, radiating the heat off of tarmac, and because it's an Air Force base, the distances. You need area to take off. For planes to take off, so you don't need trees in the way. So there wasn't much shade. So the first thing I noticed was that everybody was super happy. Everyone was having a fantastic time. I don't think anybody was really having a bad time Friday the entire day. This even, when they encountered the prices of water and beer, pizza, which perhaps was the first thing that I noticed. Now,
I read a little bit about that. I mean, were those prices of like those necessities, was that seen as kind of predatory by some? Did folks feel like, hey, I got to eat, I got to drink something, and this is kind of out of reach?
For sure. For me, now, with a grain of salt, the Canadian dollar never matches the US. So if I'm paying US dollars for something, I'm always going to find it a bit more expensive.
Sure.
But at the time in 1999, when I was there, I thought, wow, this is expensive for a bottle of water or a pizza. And I thought, if you had the choice to buy a piece of pizza or a beer, everyone's going to choose the beer, hands down. They're there to party.
Right.
So you're going to be dealing with people that are, empty stomach, drunk, or whatever else they've ingested.
For sure. I mean, some folks are in there with like vodka hidden in water bottles.
Yes. Well, actually, and I was bringing it in, mixing it with Crystal Light. Remember that little powdered?
Of course. little came in little sachets.
Yeah. So, but see, I was fortunate enough to be able to get some free food and to be able to go and have a cold shower, be able to go and get some rest, I guess.
Get some shade if you need it.
Sure. Yeah, and go in the back where we had tents with food and that sort of thing. So I really, immediately when I got there, I thought, this isn't going to go over well with some people. People are not going to enjoy this. I wouldn't enjoy this. Now, I've had experiences at 3-day music festivals before that, ironically, or coincidentally, in my hometown of 30 minutes north, 20 minutes north of Sudbury, Ontario. We used to host a 3-day music festival. And people come out with their campers and there'd be rock and roll for 3 days. But we were in kind of a wooded area, and I experienced it. It was super fun. I was able to then drive home and have a shower at my house. But I've also then experienced in '96 the Eden Festival, which is a 3-day music festival just outside of Toronto, where people were able to camp and so forth. Again, outside of a racetrack, most sport racetrack, but there was some wooded areas. There was grass, and again, it was maybe not as hot. I don't know, but I've experienced it. Here, it felt different. It was flat. It was asphalt. I think it was hot, and All my reading and research on Woodstock 99 was that it was an exceptionally hot weekend. So Woodstock 69 and 94 experienced rain and, clouded. So, overcast. So this was crazy. This was blaring sun without a cloud in the sky. So yeah, you could see it. I mean, choose water or beer. You're going to choose the beer when you're there to party. So, but again, Friday was fine. Everybody was just walking around. And when we were walking around, everyone was just happy. They flashed the at us and stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, I mean, everybody seemed to be in good spirit. Everybody was getting going.
Was that pretty common? Like folks were pretty
wasn't even flashing. There was topless.
Gotcha.
And painted top. The breasts were just painted. Guys
right.
Wearing a sock only.
Yeah, AKA Red Hot Chili Peppers.
That style for sure. Yeah. And so people were walking around, people were dressed up pretty funky and whatever. And it was a fun atmosphere. So we didn't really encounter anything the first day. I mean, people were still cautious. People were still sober.
Sure.
So yeah, that day was fun. What I did notice that day, we went up and we caught Sheryl Crow and, we're mingling in the crowd. It's so many thousands of people, a sea of people. Sorry. So you wanted to get up to where people were. You don't want people passing out in the middle of the crowd either. So we're trying to mingle and kind of look around. And the thing is that it's the topic of sex or to be rude or rude. It came out easy. People were, begging for Sheryl Crow to show us chanting that. Where she, beckoned back to the crowd,
How'd she respond? How'd she respond to that?
Well, with her southern accent, she said something. You want to see my? You'll have to pay more than you did to get in here to see my. Stuff like that.
And that probably really disarmed the audience, didn't it? Because I mean, they're joking. She's joking back with them and whatnot.
That's right. Right, but I mean, it maybe have foreshadowed what many believe would have happened later, with some of the cases of sexual harassment or assault that had happened later on. So, but again, I've been to music festivals. I've heard that sort of thing before. You've seen and heard crowds act kind of unruly like this. So, I mean, it didn't really, what am I going to do? Stop, 30, 40, 50,000 people chanting that.
You can't do it. It's not going to happen.
No, but you know what I mean? Like, at the time,
but did it surprise you that like they were harassing the artists like that and that folks were?
I guess they were doing it in jest, right? And
sure,
everyone's just having a good time, and so and I'm not trying to excuse any of that behavior at all, but I'm just saying at the time you don't know what's going to happen next. So it's just Friday, and you think the sun's up and everyone's having a great time, and yeah. So I mean.
Did you feel, Rob, like they were like stacking the show too, where folks were like really looking forward to like what was happening on Sunday? So there are like a lot of bands that still were in the lineup that hadn't played yet.
No, not really, because Friday, I think it was Friday. You'll have to research this one. I think did Kid Rock play on Friday? But anyway, he was just an emerging artist at the time. Or he was just starting to get traction. And, he went off. I think DMX was massive at the time. So these guys were all playing on Friday. I think everyone was looking forward to Saturday, of course, with Limp Bizkit and Rage Against the Machine and Metallica. But don't forget, Friday had Korn. And Korn is also, they were sitting on top of the pedestal at that time.
Massive.
They were massive. And I was surprised that Bush was going to play after. I had seen Bush at the eating festival that I just spoke of, and they surprised me on how good they were.
But it's a lot lighter fare, isn't it, than Korn? So I mean, you'd think maybe they'd reverse the two, but so like people maybe felt like they were kind of let down afterwards, but that wasn't the case.
I was in the thick of that audience, like trying to creep close for Korn. In my early 20s, I had no qualms of saying that I loved that sort of style. And I loved it. I mean, in fact, it was the second time I saw Korn. I saw them at Lollapalooza. So now they just really gained traction by this time. And so I thought, yeah, how is this other band, this British rock and roll band, going to play after? And though I had seen them before, and they had, Bush, I'm speaking of, had played great, I was still surprised. And when they did go on after, I thought, okay, here come the Water Bombs, here come the Bluebirds, and no, no, they 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 equalized the performance that Korn did. The
And
Korn,
what was it? What was this? Was this like maybe 2 or 3 years, Rob, past like Gavin Rossdale? Gavin, right? Is that his name
I think
from
so.
Bush? Like 2 or 3 years past like massive prime when they were being played on the radio constantly.
I think so. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I was surprised. I thought, how are they going to go on after? But in fact, it's funny now. I'm thinking that I just read that this new book about Lollapalooza, about how all the bands didn't want to play last. They wanted to play second last. Most of the big headliners at Lollapalooza. So perhaps there was a bit of that. Maybe
Why was that? Why didn't they want to play last?
because they kind of feel that, all right, my money's spent. I'm ready to go home, and you can kind of walk out. I don't know. So that's sort of how the book just came out. It's called Lollapalooza, and it's the history of Lollapalooza, and it just seemed like many of the bands didn't want to play that second, or sorry, the last slot. They wanted to play the second one. So maybe it was one of those cases. But regardless, the crowd didn't seem to subside, and they didn't start throwing bottles, and they didn't boo. They stayed, and Bush put on an excellent performance to match the performance that Korn put on. So Friday night was awesome. There was a party in the rave hangars afterwards. So when the main stage acts would end, everyone would head over to the hangars where emerging artists would be playing during the day, but at night, after the main acts had finished, they would have these major electronic artists playing. That rave scene was still in full
So it was
swing.
kind of like a quasi rave happening.
100%. Oh yeah, not quasi. It was full on.
Okay.
So I believe Moby played Friday night. And
So Moby's playing in the hangar when there are two bands playing on the main stages. Is that right? So you got three things to choose from?
No, as soon as the main stages end, if you want to keep partying, there's going to be a rave going on.
So this is late.
Oh yeah. And then, the parties, like, people are going to continue partying all night long. So everyone heads to the rave hangar. So you got to imagine you have people coming from the east stage, thousands and thousands of people who don't want to stop partying, and people that are coming from the west stage, thousands and thousands of people who don't want to stop partying. They're going to go where any kind of music. I think one of the nights they had this, impromptu sort of drum on anything happening outside. So one of the nights Moby played, I think it was Friday. So we get in there, and because of our passes, we're sort of allowed to be backstage, side stage, watching Moby. Now, at this time, Moby hadn't received the accolades yet for that album play, so he wasn't as huge as he would be, but he had still had quite a following in the electronica scene, and he got on stage and really blew us away. He really blew us away. And it wasn't any of the ambient stuff that he later would be known for. It was, beats per minute and just escalating beats per minute. It was quite a scene, and it was fun. And so you're amping up the crowd. I mean, these people then, on whatever they're on, they're not willing to just, okay, nighty night, and we're going to go and get some rest for tomorrow. I think people are continuing to go. Vendors were probably closed at that time, but I mean, everybody was bringing in alcohol, or I'm sure they were. Like, I didn't have any authority to search people, but people had substances to continue partying all night long. So that was sort of Friday for me. Saturday, we woke up probably a bit groggy, but really eager to get to the first band, the Tragically Hip. And that was our band. That was the Canadian.
This is the band. Could you tell that there were a lot of Canadians there? Was there Canadian flags?
Yeah, there were dozens and dozens of Canadian flags and proud Canadians who, crossed the border to see this. Uh, Canadians singing "No Canada" and just lots of pride, lots of pride for this alternative act, an alternative rock and roll act that has legendary status within Canada.
So these guys are from Kingston. Is that pretty close to where you grew up?
No, that's just outside, in between Ottawa and Toronto, on the border with the United States, on the
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's rock and roll band from the early '80s that just, you know, took everyone's hearts, never mattered the age, until now. I mean, people are still fanatics about this band.
So
We
they're
can have
about
another podcast about that.
so Rob, they're about 16 years old at this time. Started in '83, and they've got just probably a huge plethora of hits that they're playing. Am I right?
Yeah, yeah. And when the grunge scene came in, they sort of went a little bit more alternative rather than blues rock, and that just, it was a smooth transition into what they were doing, and they're just really interesting as well, and not something for everybody. So when they hit the stage, it was great. Every Canadian came out of the woodwork to see that. So anyway, that was Saturday. We were pretty pumped. I got photos of being in the middle of the pits for that. The day was just, starting to kick off.
So when you say pits, Rob, was there are you talking like
Well,
was there like mosh pits and
well, no, I wouldn't say
stage diving and all that kind of stuff
I
happening?
wouldn't say a stage dive, but you know what I mean. Like, people are still body surfing or whatever. You're tight, right? Like, I mean, you don't really have much room. Like, it's thousands of people that are packed together. If you look at any of the photos, like, it's.
But the venue's not stopping people from doing this type of stuff. They're fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, people are body surfing, jumping off shoulders. I mean, yeah, I mean, the footage will show that was happening. But I mean, again, it's a sea of people. It's
Right.
not just like at an arena. This is a sea, thousands upon thousands of people in the heat and soaked in alcohol, So then the day kicks off, and one of the women in our group is a huge Counting Crows fan, and she's so eager to see Counting Crows. So we got to get there. We got to. And meanwhile, well, this is sort of our shift. So I have the walkie, and I'm like, okay, well, we're just going to work our way that way. And yes, we see people that need water. We see people that are maybe lost. We all decided on that day, on Saturday, after making a mistake on the first day, let's bring our backpacks. So we brought our backpacks in and filled them with water bottles, so that you might see someone kind of dehydrated, and you might cheer them up, just a bottle of water. So our backpacks were full. I made sure not to give the pink one with pink Crystal Light, but we had dozens and dozens of bottles in all of our backpacks that we would hand out. And man, did we become popular handing out water for free,
So if you wanted to actually like pick up water from one of the vendors, what would you guess, Rob, that would cost you?
I think back then it was $2 US. Now that might not be something now, but in '99 that was something.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys have probably spent a lot just to be there.
Yeah.
And if they can save $2 here and there, of course, they're going to be pretty excited about it.
Oh, for sure. So we head that way, and she's eager to try to get back behind stage. So I'm like, well, yeah, okay. Like, we got a walkie-talkie. We can make that look like we're pretty important. But our shirts, our t-shirts are red. So our staff shirts are red color. Now the security wear yellow. And so what we thought, they were informed only to allow other yellow t-shirted people behind stage. But here we are, just walking and not being harassed. So, just pretending that we're supposed to be there. And so we managed to get behind stage and walk around to the far side and go up the ramp where Counting Crows are just finishing their set. So as this lead singer, Adam Dirts, is walking off, she gets a photo with him, and she's super excited, right? A hug in the photo. And by this time, I'm kind of shocked that we're behind stage, two, meeting.
Did they explicitly tell you, Rob, like, don't go behind stage? This is what you can do. This is what your passes will allow. And then you kind of just like took some liberties because you had the walkie-talkies, you had the special shirts, things were kind of loosey-goosey. How did you do it?
Yeah, a little 50-50. I'm not sure
Right.
they told us explicitly, don't try to go behind stage. I don't think they said you can't go behind stage. I think they probably said, the you don't have the authority to go behind there, or, you won't be able to get behind there with these. But yeah, things were pretty loosey goosey among all the staff. And it could be different for others. I'm sure other people tried and maybe people were turned away, but at this particular time, we were not turned away. We were allowed. And we took advantage of it for the rest of that afternoon. For right or wrong, again, we were in our 20s. And so we were just happy to be at Woodstock. So here we are on stage, and Adam Dirts, I remember him. I mean, I wasn't the biggest Counting Crows fan. I know a lot of people were at that time, but I knew that he had.
What were some of their songs again? Like Mr. Jones, was that one of them?
Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
I think I liked that December one. But yeah, I mean, I know that it was a huge.
Oh yeah, I remember
album.
that December one. I haven't heard that one for ages.
In fact, I think they're touring with a great band that I like now called Gaslight Anthem. So we may end up seeing them again this summer.
I always, Rob, I always kind of confused them back in the day. I'm sure a lot of people did this with Blues Traveler. They were kind of similar.
Yeah,
maybe
you're right. Yeah, maybe.
There was that video that Blues Traveler did where, if you remember the Blues Traveler guy, he was a pretty heavy person, not the most attractive person of all time. And so there was a music video that kind of looked like the guy from, what band are we talking about again? What's
Counting Crows?
Counting Crows. The guy from Counting Crows kind of looks like him, and then it kind of went back and forth with the guy from that. So maybe that's why I'm kind of conflating the two.
Well, anyway, we're behind stage, and I knew my sister liked it, that band. And
were you kind of nervous though? Like, you're behind stage, Counting Crows.
Yeah,
it's fun, but if you're going to be behind stage and meeting an artist, this is not who you want to meet. This is not the band that you want to meet. Are you blowing your opportunity to see some of the bands that you really want to see front and center?
I don't think so. I don't think I was nervous. I was pretty excited to be behind that. I kept thinking, oh my God, I just took some photos with all of Rage Against the Machine's like boxes of equipment and stuff like that. So I was pretty excited. And I thought, okay, well, let's not get kicked out of here. Let's try to milk this. That's kind of what I was thinking.
And so, were you able to do your job servicing the community at this point, or
that's a tough question.
Had you forsaken your volunteer duties to be up on stage at that point?
Yeah, I would probably say that's probably correct. I think we were, we could say we were looking at a different vantage point.
Was this because like the crystal light was influencing you guys a bit too much at this point?
Probably, yeah, probably. So all those inhibitions are gone, I guess. So I didn't know what to say to this guy from Counting Crows, so I asked him how it was dating the girls from Friends. I think he dated Jennifer Aniston. And
did he really?
And I think that was the thing in the news, right? That he moved on to one or the other. And
how long, Rob, did you prep that type of question? Did you give it like 10 minutes and go, this is the only question I want to ask is a Friends question?
My information and knowledge of the band was pretty limited, but I think I knew that from just, media or whatever. So I asked him to sign my shirt for my sister. I actually asked her today if she still had that shirt. She says she does. So when I asked him that, he looked at me like I was the biggest idiot, and he just gave me an answer like I was the biggest idiot. And was like, yeah, it was good. And he moved on. And so I was like, yeah, I'm an idiot. I don't know. Okay, it's a stupid one. So as he left the stage, we noticed the members of Dave Matthews Band, and they were about to come up the stage.
Dave Matthews is about 5 years famous at this point, right? So they're on probably like album number 3. So Crash has been released, Under the Tables or whatever that's called. That was released at this point. They're pretty popular.
Oh, Yeah, and very, very much so. I had seen them in Ottawa on the other album. It's off my head right now, but before these crowded streets, and so it was such a spectacular show in Ottawa, and so I saw him now again, or he's now about to go on stage, and it's funny. On that album, he does a duet with Alanis Morissette, another Canadian.
Canadian. Yeah, she's
He's gonna
from Ottawa. That's right.
Yeah. So she's going to play after Dave Matthews at Woodstock. So I'm guessing that they're going to do a duet. This is, I'm thinking they're going to play that song called Spoon, and they're going to do it on stage.
So
I'd like to-
Alanis is a performer as well on her own and she's done performing.
No, she's going to play after Dave Matthews.
Okay.
So I'm trying to strategically position myself so that I can watch Dave Matthews. A, because at the time I loved Dave Matthews then, and then B, wasn't a huge Alanis Morissette fan, but I'm thinking, you know what, they're gonna do a duet. She'll either go on with Dave or he'll come on with her. So, excuse me. So he and Boyd, the violinist, come up and kind of greet us as they're going up the ramp to go on stage.
That guy's an incredible violinist.
Yeah.
Do you know if he's still playing with Dave Matthews, or is he? I know they've shifted players quite a bit.
I think he's not a part of the band any longer.
I think you're right.
They're going up, and the ushers or the security is kind of like pushing them onto stage. It's time, go, and we're greeting him. High fives and whatnot, and we're trying to say, "Hey, Dave, blah blah, can I have a photo or whatever?" And so he stops. He stops and pushes the handler, I guess, aside and kind of gives us a moment, and comes back. Takes a few steps back and comes in and talks to us, and asks us where we're from and sort of thing. And I mean, he's just a great person, I guess, in that sense, to recognize that we're just fans. We're working there, but we're fans. So
could people tell that you guys? Could they tell that you were Canadians? Could they hear it in the accent, or did you guys mention it, or they just assume you're New Yorkers?
Can you tell my Canadian accent?
Well, I can tell that I don't want you to take off, hoser.
Yeah. So, I mean,
a little bit. I mean, you don't draw like an American. A little crisper.
Well, there were only two of us that were from Canada that were in our little posse.
Got it.
Five. So I don't know. I probably told him we were from Canada, or I was from Canada. But anyway, he went on stage and, he played awesome and the band played awesome. And so we watched from the side. And then as the rest of our kind of crew was dispersing and whatever, I went on to the other side of the stage, and now I was sort of by myself. And I sort of was like, not hiding, but kind of just standing there. And I thought, I'm just going to stand here and see how much I can enjoy for a while. I got a bag full of Crystal Light and vodka, so I'm good to go. So I think our shift ended. I think that's what it was. Our shift ended, and so our crew was just dispersing.
So even though you were, I'm not trying to sound rude, you were a delinquent volunteer, because your shift had ended, you completely felt free to just enjoy yourself at that point.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Like everyone wanted to perhaps go back, freshen up, whatever. Again, I wanted to see what was going to happen on the next set, if Dave's going to show up with Alanis,
for sure,
whatever. And I also know that, hey, there's still Limp Bizkit and Rage Against the Machine and Metallica coming on.
These are huge acts in '99. I mean, they're still big.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm just kind of staying quiet, staying mum, and I'm standing off the stage, not making a scene. And I'm watching Alanis, and to be honest, I'm kind of cringing because I'm not a huge fan. I'm still not an Alanis Morissette fan. I can understand.
She's playing a lot of Jagged Little Pill stuff, I'm guessing.
Yeah, for sure. And she, she was huge back then. So, and which my segue, she must have been huge, because I get a tap on my shoulder, and there's this guy wearing hat on backwards, I guess. Definitely wearing a black and white jersey, basketball jersey, and I realize it's Mr. Puff Daddy.
No way.
Or whatever, P. Diddy, or whatever name he's going with at the time. And he asks me if he can just stand over there and watch. And he and his handler who am I to say no, you can't? Sort of put on my authority hat. I said, go ahead.
Why was Puff Daddy there? Was he one of the acts as well, or was he just enjoying the concert?
That question has racked my brain for 26 years. I have no idea why Puff Daddy.
Rob, you're saying that he never went on stage as a performer, though. He was there.
That's it. He was just
Right.
there.
Okay.
So,
are you sure it was Puff Daddy, or was it maybe a little lookalike? It was him. Okay.
I'm sure it was Puff Daddy. And
the reality now is you can sometimes have to choose Puff Daddy in a lineup. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
So it's my claim to fame. I guess I see him, and I'm like, oh,
are you kind of like at the same time though, Rob? Like at this point, are you having like celebrity overload? You're like, I can't believe how many famous folks I'm interacting with.
Yeah.
And this is Puff Daddy. This is pretty crazy, but this is just par for the course for today.
Yeah. And it is. And so I'm kind of shocked. Then I don't know what to say to Puff Daddy. So I start saying, in my best rapper lingo that I'm from Canada, and he's just like, cool, good, kind of good for you. So I let him and his handler go off to the side of the stage to watch Alanis. Not sure why he was interested in Alanis Morissette, not taking away anything from her being a great performer and a Canadian artist or whatnot. I just didn't see the connection. But Limp Bizkit's coming on, perhaps. Rage Against the Machine's coming on. And again, I still don't know. Maybe he's a cameo. Maybe he's coming on as a special guest, as a surprise performer. We don't know yet. Any of the surprises that might happen at Woodstock.
But Rob, all these bands that you're mentioning, I wouldn't put as Puff Daddy's favorites. Guessing.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I know he's a producer and whatnot. He's very much involved in, or was in, the music business. I have no idea. But anyway, just as that moment goes by, and just as I'm reflecting on how stupid I sounded telling him I was from Canada and probably my grin, I get another tap.
At least you didn't ask him about dating people from Friends.
Yeah, exactly. Well, or any of his dating. So
yeah, exactly. Who knew?
But I get another tap on my shoulder, and this man asks me, on behalf of this other gentleman wearing this long white fur coat, if this guy could also go out there and watch. And it's Kid Rock. And so the handler is asking me.
That sounds like Kid Rock.
If Kid Rock could go out there. And he doesn't say a word. He's kind of quiet, and he's in his pimp outfit, whatnot. And he's going to go out there and on the side of the stage and watch Alanis as well. So here I am thinking, why is Puff Daddy and Kid Rock watching Alanis? What do they know that I don't? Why don't I like her as much? And I'm Canadian.
You're Canadian.
So I'm like, what's going on here? But anyway, so
was this like a precursor to your disdain for Avril Lavigne at all? Or
she's also from Ottawa, I think. So anyway, I watched the performance. Dave Matthews doesn't come out, and now I really got to pee. I've got too much vodka Crystal Light in my belly. Meanwhile, the radio is going off. They're asking.
Would you say like you're in an atmosphere where if you wanted to just pee right there, you could just pee off the stage, or do you have to find a place?
Yeah, I got to figure this out. So I go behind the stage where I know that there's some porta potties that are behind there. And I'm like, okay, I got to just go and relieve myself in one of these and then come back and enjoy the rest of the concert. Meanwhile, I'm also pretty drunk.
Right.
I'm also in the sun drinking lots of alcohol.
And you're becoming a massive Alanis fan at the same time.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, so I walk behind the stage, I find a toilet, I relieve myself, and then I spot.
Was there a huge line for these toilets, or is this just like these are performers?
Performers.
Right.
Oh yeah. Solid gold toilet seats, right? So I see this. So it gets a bit blurry here, but I stumble upon the Much Music tent, And for those of you listening who don't know Much Music, that's the Canadian equivalent of MTV. So I want to go and check out.
Okay, Rob, I'm pausing you for a second. So Much Music is MTV in Canada,
Yeah.
but you also have MTV in Canada. I have to assume that.
I
No?
mean, well, if you like back in the day, if you subscribe to that channel, I guess.
Okay.
But not really.
So Much Music is a
no.
channel, or is it like a program on the CBC? What is it?
No, it's a channel.
Okay.
Yeah. So back in the day, if you flipped it to MTV, same thing in Canada, you would flip it to Much Music, all
Is it
day
like
music.
kind of like VH1 for Canada?
100%, same thing.
Okay.
And so you grew up with Much Music. Obviously, they would play a lot of Canadian content, but of course, they would play all the popular bands at the time as well, right? So if you were into any music, it came through Much Music because no one had MTV in Canada. I don't know what the rights were or whatever, but no, the music channel was Much Music. The sports channel was TSN. We didn't have ESPN. And so that's where you watched your sports. That's where you watched your music. So yeah, so I wander in because I know all the VJs. I know all of the same sort of celebrities that VH1 would have, or was it Carson Daly or whatever you guys had.
Martha Quinn. Sure.
Sure. So I wanted to go in and see these guys. Now, when I do, they realize that I'm pretty drunk, and so they're
Right.
like, they welcomed me as every good Canadian would, and sat me down and put a plate of food in my hand and started to ask me about how I got this job and basically doing what you're doing right now. So I remember kind of being in and out of consciousness in their tent full of pillows and throws and eating some sort of mashed potatoes and meat and saying thank you, and still drinking my pink Crystal Light and vodka. And then I stumbled out and I made my way to see the ending of Limp Bizkit. And then I was like, okay, I gotta gather myself. I gotta figure this out because I want to see Rage Against the Machine. I really want to see Rage Against the Machine.
Why Rage?
Oh, well, I was a big fan of Rage Against the Machine. I mean, I think most people my age were into Rage Against the Machine. I mean, they were pretty popular and pretty aggressive and whatever. It was going to be awesome, right? Tom Morello and his guitar skills or antics, is something you want to watch. So I wanted to make sure that I was conscious for that. I also wanted to make sure that I would see Metallica. I damn well needed enough energy for Chemical Brothers. So I had to get my shit together. I had to get it together, and I had to return my radio. So I remember booking it, getting my radio handed off, coming back, looking for my friend Eric, and not being able to do so. Yeah, then there's some other. I think we did meet up after, and we had some magic mushrooms, and well, yeah, that night got a little fuzzy. So
Did you get a seat? Did you go behind the stage or side stage for some of these bands that you were really looking forward to? Did you get to do the same thing with Rage, or did you have to stay in the audience at that point?
So because I left, so now I left with the radio from the Much Music tent. So I was sort of behind this side of the stage with Limp Bizkit, and then I was like, all right, I need to collect myself and I need to get this back to, the radio needs to get back to the organizers, I guess, for the other crews that will be doing what I'm doing. Now, bear in mind, it's not like there was, yes, we had shifts, but cross shifts, I don't really remember there were too many cross shifts. Some people were going to be working after me. It was just more or less, we need the radio for tomorrow or whatever. And, quite possibly there was two shifts, like a morning shift and an afternoon, but I don't really think there were multiple shifts, going all night or whatever. So anyway, I did so, came back, enjoyed Rage, Metallica, Chemical Brothers, had some magic mushrooms, and somehow got back to the barracks. I hope I have my timeline right. But anyway, it was quite fuzzy. So the next day was Sunday. And we were trying to gather ourselves together and how we could when should we be leaving? Because we still have to drive back to Canada and cross the border.
At night.
Well, depending on how long we were going to stay at the festival. Yeah. So Sunday rolled around. Now, if I'm not mistaken, there was an incident in the rave head. I remember there being like the fire department coming or some security because I think there was a guy who drove a vehicle into the crowd, like he was kind of cruise, like not.
Like a terrorist event, or
No, I don't think it was any terrorist activity, but he was just in there, and then this was obviously wrong to have a vehicle where people are, you know, partying. So I think that happened on either Friday or Saturday nights, if I'm not mistaken. And so when you're in the rave hangar, that's sort of the way all the workers would go to get back to the barracks. We'd cut through the barracks. I'm sorry, cut through the side of the stage, and kind of go behind the stage, and then you'd be at the eating tent where they would provide food for you at various times throughout the day, like the breakfast and the lunch and dinner sort of thing. It would be also the place where you would meet up with your group and hand off your radio or collect your radio or so forth. I think on the Saturday, that's when maybe Perry Farrell was. It could have been Sunday. I remember going in there. He was just finishing up speaking to everybody, and he was going around kind of like giving people high fives and whatnot. And I was a huge Jane's Addiction fan, massive. So I was so surprised to see Perry Farrell there, and had the opportunity to kind of give him a high five. And so that was cool. My timeline on when that happened escapes me. But so Sunday was kind of groggy. It was kind of a hangover morning, I think, for most people. Because Saturday was so huge for everybody. And again, not many incidents that I can describe that I witnessed had happened. Yes, a lot of boob flashing. Yes, a lot of, people talking about getting together to, have the big photo of the most nude people or whatever, and all this type of fun stuff you'd think would go on at concert or festivals and crap, especially named Woodstock. So all that stuff is happening. Everyone's still in a great mood. Sunday, everyone's sort of just hungover, wanting to watch movies and hang out in one of the rave hangars or one of the hangars. The bands on the Sunday were particularly lighter, I thought, although Seven Dust and some of them played, but it was sort of all over the map again, not as intense as the ending to Saturday by any means. So we knew that Red Hot Chili Peppers was coming. We knew that Megadeth was coming, but that was going to be later in the day. I was kind of interested in seeing and just kind of, getting through my hangover. One of the bands that had impressed me, but she had impressed me back when I first saw her. And again, just kind of stumbled upon, never bought the ticket to see her. She just happened to be opening up for Neil Young and Crazy Horse, was Jewel. And she blew me away when I saw her. She was nothing like the stuff on the radio. She had more of a bluesy tone going on, and it was just awesome.
She's a real talented musician. I think she's from a musician family. I think she's from up in Alaska, I believe. That's where she grew up.
I don't know.
And so she was playing with Neil Young, you said? So Neil Young was there as well?
No. I had gone to see Neil Young in Toronto as he was just doing a reuniting with Crazy Horse, and back in '96, with all these great bands opening up like Oasis and Screaming Trees and such. But one of them, and she stood out. I thought, well, she doesn't fit. It's Jewel, but she did. It was great. And so I was telling my buddy Eric, I'm like, we should go check out Jewel. She's going to be great, and she didn't disappoint. She was great. I don't know. There was a couple bands we wanted to see, but we were like, okay, well, we got to pack, dude. We got to get out of here. We got to start making our way back. But we hung out, but what we did notice on Sunday was that all of the trailers, the truck and trailers, the trailers had moved in for the vendors, and they were positioned on the tarmac where people were normally enjoying the show. So inevitably, they were being, people were sitting underneath these trailers to get shade. Again, this is day 3 of just blazing heat, with no shade on the tarmac, and having to walk great distances to see these bands with outrageous prices for food and water.
Rob, I don't know if you can do this in Fahrenheit. You're probably not great at Fahrenheit, but 90s? Is that right? 90s maybe? 100? Possibly?
If you have Google right now, you can go up and you
Yeah.
can check
Yeah,
out what it was.
I'll take a look.
Yeah, I would say in the 90s in Fahrenheit for sure, if not higher. I would say closer to like 95, pretty steadily 95 Fahrenheit.
Okay, are you ready? It said it reached over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 38 degrees for our Canadian neighbors. And some reports indicated that it topped up to feeling like it was 104 degrees. That's hot. And
Well,
also, so New York is in July, it's a bit of a humid place too, right? So 104 is pretty brutal.
black tarmac radiating the heat
Right.
back at you. People were burnt out, burnt and baked, and not just from the drugs. Like their brains were baked from the sun, and their bodies were burnt from the sun. They were burnt out from partying. Where they got the energy to continue going, that was beyond me. But so most of the day, hundreds of people were all over these trailers, the big truck trailer, sitting underneath, climbing on top. And then it's only a matter of time before they broke into one, before they got the latches off. And then, you started to notice the looting, probably mid-afternoon, on this Sunday, the looting started. And so my question was, well, where was anybody to stop this? But it seemed like at that point, people were already packed in. So yeah, you might say, hey, dude, you were on stage and you weren't really looking after people that were dehydrated yeah, but I think there was a lot of people like by Sunday before these fires started happening, people had already checked out. People were gone. The volunteers were gone. The vendors had already closed up their shop.
So
And
folks were starting to, like, the support staff wasn't there like it was at the beginning, but the folks there still needed the support.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like from my standpoint, I'm already thinking of checking it in and
Rob, what were they looting? What were they taking from these trailers? Do you know?
T-shirts, CDs.
Okay, this is like the merch tent.
Whatever. Yeah, whatever they were there. I mean, there were probably beads and whatnot, and they were breaking in and finding and discovering. So I remember seeing a ton of tents, like merch tents with boxes, in bins with no staff. So you're just thinking, well, the table's not going to stop people, So it's kind of strange. People started ripping down the fencing. They were great murals that were up there and stuff. Maybe they wanted souvenirs, but it was like there was nothing going on. There was no support. There was no security or anything going on at that time. The security was probably still around the stage, but it just seemed like, for myself anyway, when we were walking around that Sunday afternoon, yeah, people were already packing it in, ready to roll, get out of there as fast as they could. And I get it. I'm no different. I was thinking, how do I get back to Canada? I gotta work the next day, or I gotta go to school the next day. Oh, I guess I was working the next day. But so I was like, how do I get back? And when are we going to leave? And I still have a 3.5 hour drive ahead of me, plus the border crossing. And I'm sure people were, much longer. I'm talking about the volunteer staff. They probably had longer drives. They came from anywhere in the States. So yeah. So, I mean, I was kind of no different, but then you started to see the break-ins to these trailers. And then you saw like piles of just whatever, their tables, their chairs, whatever was looted being set on fire in the early evening. The sun was starting to go down, so the fire was happening, and now people are trying to run and jump across the fire, and it's just turning into this circus. Myself and Eric are in no way able to contain a crowd that's doing that, not with there's 250,000 people who are there.
Was it Rob? Was it like they were just like entertaining themselves by setting things on fire, or could they have potentially lit all of Woodstock on fire based off of what they were incinerating?
Well, they wouldn't have. No, I mean, on the tarmac in the middle of the runways, they're setting these little fires up, and then multiple fires are going. So you're kind of thinking, well, just leave these guys be. You're not going to go up and stop these drunk, 3-day bender guys from throwing more shit on the fire. Okay.
Right.
So like, I don't want to say I'm one man, but also, okay, well, don't be dumb enough to stand around a fire like that. Don't be dumb enough to continue to make it bigger, but it got big, right? So around that time, we were like, okay, I think it's time that we start getting out of here for various reasons, because it was starting to get a little chaotic. We didn't know it was going to get as chaotic as we then saw on the news. We were more like, let's get out of here to beat the traffic, you know, back to the highway and start making our way up. There wasn't anybody around to say, okay, well, here's, thanks for coming. Thanks for working. Here's your certificate or whatever. It was just a free for all. Okay, let's walk back to the barracks, grab the keys, back our stuff.
You're not signing out. You're not going through any
No,
process. You just take off.
no, no. So yeah, again, like, I'm just looking online here. They're saying that the ticket sales were 186,000, but it could have been much higher, and I had heard somewhere around 350,000, but I could be wrong. But being on stage and seeing the amount of people, it was a sea as far as I could see and as wide as I could see. It was just heads of people. So there was a lot of people there. And so the aftermath, hearing of the I'd like to call them atrocities, but hearing of some of the stuff that happened, it didn't really surprise me, not for the magnitude of people, plus, the factors of heat, cost. People went animalistic. So I know you're going to ask me, could things have been handled differently? Well, yeah, probably. We could have had more people, more security, more, but I think just the venue itself was a problem. It was problematic. Like I mentioned earlier, I've been to 3-day music festivals that have trees and shade and, places to escape from the heat. I've been, places where they have mist areas where you go and you walk through and you're getting cooled off. Other tents to hang out. I don't know. I don't want to badmouth any of the organizers, but like, it just seemed poorly managed in that regard. Is that why an Air Force base? You know, but, like, I don't mind walking on grass. Yeah, I don't mind the distance of walking on grass among trees and whatnot. But on a tarmac, I guess it's easy to clean up. So anyway, we got out of there, and I remember it being actually, we hit the road and it was dark. So we stayed until it was dark. And in the summer, that must have been pretty late. So I'm assuming one of the like late headliners had started. I don't know if it was Megadeth. I kind of feel like we saw the beginning of Megadeth. I know I didn't see. I must have been leaving when Red Hot Chili Peppers was starting. I kind of feel that in my memory, but I know that at that point we had already packed up the car and we were already kind of getting going.
So, Rob, while you were taking off, would you say that the chaos that was Woodstock 99 was escalating, or was it starting to de-escalate at that point?
Again, I mean, I didn't know how bad it would get, right? But I would probably use the word escalated. I don't
Right.
see, like, people that are there, they're there to party. I don't see anyone at the end of Woodstock saying, okay, well, it's time to go home now. And it's time that we, clean up after ourselves and take down our tents in an orderly fashion. I think most people were there to party all night and probably leave the following day on the Monday, which I think a majority of them did. So, or had planned to. So I think by that time, the fires were starting because it was getting dark and it was kind of cool to create a big bonfire. I mean, who doesn't love a bonfire? But yeah, they were getting a little bit out of control. So I'd like to think that, they escalated. And while I wasn't there to witness it, I think it wasn't happening as much as people think it was while the concert was actually going on. So, like, you can't bookend it and say it ended when Red Hot Chili Peppers ended. I don't think it subsided then. I think it probably escalated after that when people found out that there wasn't a surprise artist like most people thought there was going to be.
What do you mean? So folks thought that they were kind of like the promoters were holding something back and there was something in their back
Rumors.
pocket.
Yeah, I think rumors were going around that there was going to be a surprise artist at the end of the festival, wanting you to stick around and so forth, dangling that carrot for you.
But this is nothing that the organizers said. This is just kind of like this was hearsay from one concert goer to the next. They were sharing that with each other.
No, actually, I think even if you go online or anywhere, you can hear the promoters and the organizers talking that they did indeed have some sort of planned event that went sour. So there was supposed to be some sort of finale. But during the weekend, we all were wondering who it could be. I thought it was going to be the Rolling Stones. Actually, because of the lineup, I thought, could it even be, Nine Inch Nails or something? But I thought it would have to be a Rolling Stone-esque band. But as it turned out, like I was willing to forgo and get on the road and just sort of miss it. And as it turned out, nobody showed up, or it fell through, probably on various reasons. But one, there was no more support staff. Two, maybe the funds dried up, or who knows, or the band canceled, and the fires were going on. Right, people were starting to act chaotic. So as we were leaving, we didn't know it was gonna, like, I read it later in the papers the next day, right? How it turned out, because people continued the mayhem until until the police came to get them away. So it must have been much past the final act, if you know what I mean. So yeah.
So what happened, Rob? Like, so police were actually called in and they broke it up, or did they arrest people?
So.
What happened?
Well, again, I was gone, but I've been connected to Woodstock 99 since 99. So, I read and follow it. And so I believe the troopers came in, broke it up. Some sort of Ministry of the Interior came in to handle it, right? I mean, obviously you don't want fires going on. But by that point, it was kind of out of control, right? And you got to imagine half of the audience leaving while emergency personnel are trying to come in. So it probably created a lot of chaos and confusion, disorganization, I guess. But I mean, could that have been planned? Like, like prepared for? Maybe that would happen. I spoke to you of Eden Fest in '96 outside Toronto, and there was the same thing. There was the idea of a surprise band was going to happen on the third day, and none materialized. And I remember the entire crowd waited. And must have been 5 o'clock at night on the Sunday, only to hear that no, sorry, cancellation. And it just thousands of people walking away from the stage, disgruntled, upset. And I remember we were walking up these hills, and the hills were sort of separated from each other, and a food fight started. I mean, it's in Canada.
Where were they getting the food? Where was the food coming from? Just like this is like
throwing an apple here and there, and it just became this wild throw garbage and apples at each other from one mountain or little hill to the next. And that was the extent of the anger, right? But that was in '96. So you have to imagine, you have to be prepared. I mean, my line of work makes you always risk assess. And so you should be risk assessing any type of event that could occur. So you'd think the organizers would have thought, all right, well, what happens if it goes sour? What happens if there's a tornado? What happens if there's a flood? Whatever. And so if there's a riot, and so, or a terrorist event or something, you never know. And so you probably would have risk assessed and been prepared. And you probably would have had your personnel, your emergency personnel, on call or on the ready, to just make sure people were being escorted out early. You would have had them there to make sure that no one's looting and destroying anything. That wasn't there. You can't ask volunteers to do that. You would have had, paid emergency personnel at the ready, I would think. But
Do you think
anyway,
that, to some degree, Rob, like folks have learned something from Woodstock 99? And I mean, I haven't heard of anything to this degree of chaos and anarchy happening at a massive concert like this since then. So did they maybe learn their lesson and start putting those processes in place? Because I mean, that's a liability, right? On the venue and on the folks that are putting the concert on.
well, they must have. I mean, Lollapalooza now is a 3-day music festival in Chicago. I've attended, and it was awesome. Yeah, my wife and I went to Lollapalooza on our honeymoon to enjoy a 3-day music festival. Now, given they have opening times and closing times of when Grant Park would be closed. So there's no camping. So, you do have to leave the premises. Glastonbury, you know, they have fireworks going off. They have people with flares and stuff going on. So there's probably a lot of stuff going on.
What would you say, Rob, was if you could like put it down to one thing?
Yeah.
I mean, you're saying that like to mitigate against this, they just didn't have the staff and the processes in place to respond and or stop folks from doing this. What would you say like was the real catalyst for the chaos? Why did folks do this in the first place?
Well, I mean, that's been a debated topic since 99. In my personal opinion, I always blamed it on the prices and the heat, and probably more so the heat. And I know that may sound crazy, but if you imagine yourself a trapped animal in a cage and there's no escape and you're not getting proper nutrition or food and water, and you can't really escape this torturous heat. And while you're being teased with great music and a great party, and you keep putting substances in your body that extremely overpriced, you're getting angry. But does that make you want to destroy? Nah, I don't think so. I think you're probably getting pretty angry. You might get on your blog and say some pretty, mean things to the organizers. But I think it went on late on Sunday. And so it was going on late on Sunday without much security around. These people have been like just drawn every last piece of energy from their body, every last penny pulled from their wallet. And there's nothing around to say, hey, stop making a fire. And then the fire happens. And then that turns into, hey, I should, I'm gonna contribute to this destruction because hey, screw them. They were overcharging me for my beer and my pizza. And it's fun. You're seeing some guy throw a table. Well, I'm gonna throw a chair. And then this guy's gonna throw a fence or break down part of the fence and throw it on the fire and make it bigger and bigger, and we're all gonna have a laugh. And so it's gonna get larger and larger, and we're all just, it's gonna become the word I'm looking for. But anyway, it's going to become chaotic. It's not going to subside.
It kind of
So
built it. It kind of built on
it's
itself.
building up into a frenzy, right? And then it's out of control.
So Rob, you told me a little story about how folks wanted to recreate Woodstock 69, and that was famous, of course, for a lot of rain and mud and whatnot. And you saw something that was a little interesting. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to Woodstock, the first thing everybody there is to have the same experiences that people had 94 or 69 had, sex, drugs, rock and roll, or whatever. And so that was on the cards as well as the mudslides or mud sliding. And the thing is, there wasn't any rain in 99, and there were no waterways. And the only liquid that could be found on the ground was seeping out of the porta potty toilets that were there. Yeah, from the hand washing stations that are just adjacent. But it created this big, saturated, soaked muddy area that people thought, hey, we'll have our own mud sliding and we'll be able to say that we did that and take a photo if we're covered in mud. The reality was urine and whatever chemicals that were, you know, and like I mentioned, there weren't many
Did
staff.
you have a heart to tell these folks that they were like playing in
Yeah,
their own
yeah.
feces?
Oh yeah, I did. People didn't believe us or just, they didn't care. They just
Right.
wanted that. They did it for the gram, as the kids say. They did it for their photos and they wanted to be covered in mud and say, hey, we experienced Woodstock. Peace. But yeah, I mean, they were understaffed everywhere. So I don't imagine they had regular cleaning staff to come in and to clean the portaloos, the porta potties. So I imagine a lot of it was just overflow. Yeah, perhaps some of it's from the hand washing areas or the little bit of the free water that they did have.
But a lot of it's them just like kind of swimming in crap, really.
Yeah, if you could ask all your listeners to send their photos of the behind the porta potties or the I'm sure people have tons of photos of the liquids that are seeping around. I'm sure it's gross. It was gross.
Rob, I love how you call them portaloos. That's a
Yeah.
hark back to the fact you guys are still kind of British.
I don't know what people call them around here. So, what do you guys call them? Porta potties?
Porta potty, porta potty.
Okay,
But
there.
a loo, of course, is a British toilet, right? So portaloo,
Yeah.
right? Great.
Yeah, I don't know. But it was, I'll tell you what, it was gross.
Yeah.
But a lot of the gross stuff there. I mean, like I said, there was a lot of exposed bodies that perhaps didn't need to be exposed. There was just, yeah, there was a lot of people that looked like they'd been partying for days, and a lot of people who looked like they'd been partying for years that were there. So it was a mixture of all that, right?
Okay, so I got a photo up of the people in the mud, and you can see the portaloos, the porta potties right behind them, and they are covered head to toe in mud.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
no correlation there.
yeah, that's disgusting. This is this is horrible.
Mm.
This is awful. Okay, so winding us down here, Rob. Thanks for all your
Yeah.
time. Last few questions for you is, if you had to say who was your favorite surprise act from Woodstock '99?
Surprise act or one that
Meaning like not your favorite. Like I want to know that too. But who's your favorite surprise act? Like you weren't expecting it to be as good as it was, and you just really enjoyed it.
James Brown. James Brown was pretty awesome.
The late great James
Yeah,
Brown.
and I mean, he's gonna be awesome, right? Who else was pretty good? I was impressed by Shaw Crow. Definitely was impressed by Moby. Who else did I see that was good? I mean, there was quite a few. I mean, it's fun. I mean, that's why I go to music festivals is to be surprised, is to kind of be, is to learn from the different artists, right? And so that I mean, they're all kind of surprising. They're all kind of great in their own way. I mean, if you like live music, I always say there's always a time and place for music. It for me, whether it's country or industrial or whatever, there's time and place, and I enjoy it all. So yeah, it was just such an awesome event to be able to enjoy that. I mean, to see the power of corn and just the vibe of the audience was just awesome. And just see the passion of the Canadians when Tragically Hip hit the stage to discover new artists, to see like I really wanted to see Chemical Brothers. They just brought a huge and they didn't disappoint. So it didn't end. The Brian Seltzer Orchestra was awesome. Elvis Costello was great. I was an Elvis Costello a mediocre fan, and then it became a bigger fan. You know,
Right.
so I mean that happens all the time. The same thing with Sheryl Crow. I mean, I knew her hits from the radio,
Sure.
sure, but I mean, I wasn't the guy going to go run out and buy a Sheryl Crow CD. I mean, they play it every freaking 5 minutes on the radio.
Yeah, you don't need to
So
buy it if it's on all the time.
that's right. But I ended up buying that. And then there was this guy called Kid Rock, who the crowd was going crazy for. And he had
Out
this
of
new song called Cowboy.
Cowboy.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
was just like everyone was going nuts. think BMG music was, we used to get those CDs for a penny.
Yeah.
Something there. If you sign up, you get a bunch of CDs.
Yeah, like Columbia House. They did the same thing.
Yeah. So I think that was there. I remember signing up and I was like, I want that guy's CD. Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be a good, fun CD. And it was, so it was great just being there. Yeah. That's why I continued going to festivals.
Okay. So most memorable person that you connected with, you shared quite a few. Who's number one?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say connected. I mean, whether it's
met.
Five. Yeah. Well, you know what? Like Moby was pretty down to earth too, but I mean, Dave Matthews really stuck with me the way he sort of like, stutter stepped and made sure to come back and speak to us. So that was really a cool move on his behalf. So I thought that was cool. Dave Matthews.
Rob, would you do it again? Okay, we're gonna go back 24 years, right? Can you? Is that how long it's been? Is that right?
99. Wait, you do the math.
Wait. 26 years. 26 years.
Yeah.
Coming up 26 years. Would you do it again, knowing all that you know?
Yeah, 100%. For sure. Who wouldn't? I mean, all those. I mean, just the atmosphere. I mean, if you said, "Hey, do you want to go to a 3-day music festival for free and see all these massive bands that are already," I wouldn't say on your iPod, that wasn't there then. So, they're already in your disc changer on your mixed CDs
Yeah.
that you've been spending a fortune buying, would you go? And if it's a 3.5-hour drive, would you go and do it again and be in the sunshine? For sure. Of course I would.
Great. Rob, any other final things you want to share? Any final thoughts?
I guess my only final thought would be, I wish that someone would start to spin some positivity. And I know that that's difficult from some of the assaults and, the destruction that have happened. But I know that there's thousands of people out there that are probably arguing it, or at least saying, hey, like, that was our Woodstock. I didn't go to 94. I didn't go to 69. And I want to have some great memories of 99. And I do have. And I don't want to always be stuck here, trying to explain to someone how awesome it was to defend how great it was, because it was fantastic. No doubt there's some shit that happened that is unforgivable and terrible. So I don't want to take that away, but I do want to have a little bit of sunshine and happiness about 99. I think it was great and I'll never forget it.
Rob, you shared a ton of personal stories behind the scenes, things that no one else got to see and got to do. Kind of like everything in history, you don't know that you're a part of it, and usually until it's in hindsight. So thanks so much for being on the show and sharing insights from Woodstock 99 with us. Appreciate you, Rob.
Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap on the Wide Lens podcast. If today's episode broadened your view of history, please follow, rate, and review us. It makes a real difference. A heartfelt thanks to our guests for their story and to Sergei Shadrin for providing the music. Know someone who's witnessed a pivotal moment? Drop us a line at ideas@widelenspodcast.com. Their story could be next. Until next time, keep looking at history through the wide lens.